4 a.m. $1 billion Iskander hangar is erupting, and it's only the start in 30 surgical minutes. From the northern border all the way down to Crimea, Ukraine is deleting 60% of Putin's primary missile force. Moscow brought a brute force sledgehammer to a high-tech chess match, only to see their invincible launchers turned into burning scrap metal. Oh boy, Putin is about to find out. That invincible is just a word Ukrainians use for hasn't been hit yet. It's going to be a very long morning for the Kremlin. Putin wanted a dark winter. A total blackout was designed to force Ukraine to its knees. Before the first snow settled, his weapon of choice, the Iskander-M. This 44-ton beast is basically a Mach 7 meteor with a steering wheel, built to delete power grids and apartment blocks in seconds. However, even a sledgehammer needs a rest. To prepare for a massive nationwide surge, Putin's generals made a fatal, arrogant mistake. They bunched dozens of these launchers into repair hangars for a quick maintenance check and reload. That was the opening Ukraine was waiting for. US intelligence and stealthy recon drones spent 96 hours watching this billion-dollar parking lot grow. It was a now or never scenario. Kyiv narrowed the kill zone down to 5 critical hubs: Bryansk, Kursk, Rostov, Krasnodar, and Crimea. These aren't just random pins on a map. They're all within a 60 to 250-mile sweet spot, where Ukrainian drones can achieve 100% saturation. The obstacle, though, was still terrifying: Russia's steel umbrella. We're talking S-400s and Pantsir S-1s, a multi-layered defense, designed to track anything from a stealth fighter to a stray seagull. One wrong move, and Ukraine's entire drone fleet becomes very expensive confetti. The mission was a total gamble with the highest possible stakes. How do you turn a 30-minute window of vulnerability into a nationwide, leverage strike that deletes half of Russia's missile power? Well, it starts with a few hundred pieces of carbon fiber bait, and a very long morning for the Russian air defense. 3 a.m. Bryansk. The air is freezing, but inside the Russian air defense bunkers, things are about to get red hot. On the radar screens of the Pantsir S-1 units, a nightmare is unfolding: 60 incoming signatures flying low and fast. This is the Corvo PPDS, Ukraine's cardboard ghost. Now don't let the material fool you. These aren't hobby planes. They are precision-engineered decoys, equipped with tiny signal emitters that trick a Russian radar into thinking it's looking at a $500,000 Neptune cruise missile. The Russian operators protecting the billion-dollar Iskander hangars fall for the bait hook. Line and sinker, they panic. Their training manual says saturation attack, and their fingers hit the launch buttons. Suddenly, the sky is filled with the roar of 57 E-6 interceptor missiles screaming off their rails. Ironically, each one of those Russian missiles cost about $150,000, the price of a brand new Porsche 911. And what are they hitting? $500 pieces of wax-coated cardboard? It's a tactical disaster. The Pantsir's dual 30mm autocannons are pumping out 4,000 rounds per minute, lighting up the night, but they're essentially throwing diamonds at trash. Moscow is burning through millions of dollars in munitions just to swat paperflies. But while the Russian crews are high-fiving over their confirmed kills, the real assassins are already in the room, hugging the tree line at a mere 130 feet. Low enough to clip a tall pine are 20 Ludi stealth drones. These are the silent hunters. Their carbon fiber bodies have a radar cross-section, smaller than a crow, while the Pantsir's radar is blinded by the smoke and noise of the cardboard massacre. The Lute is slipped through the gaps in the steel umbrella. Like Ghost, the Lute doesn't just fly, it thinks it's on board. AI is scanning for a very specific thermal signature: the massive cooling units of 8 Iskander-M launchers. Tucked inside Hangar 4, the lead drone locks on and enters its terminal dive at 100 miles per hour. It doesn't just explode, it carries a specialized shaped charge warhead. Upon impact, it creates a focused jet of molten copper, traveling at 35,000 feet per second, fast enough to punch through the hangar's reinforced steel roof like a hot needle through silk. Then physics takes over in the worst way possible for the Kremlin. Inside that hangar you have 44-ton launchers, sitting next to racks of 60-pound warheads and highly volatile solid rocket fuel. We call this a sympathetic detonation. The first blast ignites the fuel. The fuel ignites the warheads in a heartbeat. The hangar transforms from a repair shop into a pressurized furnace, exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius. The result: absolute surgical eradication. 3 Iskander-M launchers, Putin's primary nuclear-capable sledgehammers, are literally liquefied into puddles of scorched aluminum. 5 massive transloader vehicles are shredded by supersonic shrapnel, their hydraulic systems vaporized. They won't be firing another missile for at least 6 months. If ever the math is brutal, Ukraine just traded a few $1,000s in cardboard and carbon fiber for hundreds of millions in Russian strategic assets. As the smoke rises over Bryansk, the Russian command is still patting itself on the back for defeating the swarm, completely unaware that its primary strike force has just been decapitated. Oh, the first domino has fallen. And just 120 seconds later, Kursk was about to find out that the nightmare was contagious. 3:00 Kursk. Russia cranks its electronic warfare to 11, creating a 50-mile GPS dead zone. They think they've built an invisible wall. Ukraine sees an invitation first. 25 plastic decoys bait the S-400s into wasting $2 million on interceptors. $500 lawn ornaments, while the sky burns with expensive Russian mistakes. The real assassins. 25. Bober drones slip in through the back door. These drones don't need satellites. They follow smart beacons. Cigarette-sized devices dropped earlier by silent gliders that project a localized optical thread immune to jamming. Inside the depot, 7 Iskander launchers are sitting ducks during a reload. A bomber pilot snipes the hydraulic arm of a transloader mid-hoist. The fluid atomizes the rocket fuel, deflagrates at 4,000 degrees, and the entire staging area becomes a pressurized furnace. The math 3 Iskanders and 4 transloaders vaporized. Putin's steel umbrella just got a drone-sized hole punched through it. But the winning streak hits a brutal reality check. Russia adapted switching its Pantsir S-1S to optical tracking, manual hunting via high-res infrared. They ignored the 10 decoys and waited. When the 6 real boobers emerged, they didn't find a gap. They found a curtain of steel from 30mm autocannons, pumping out 80 rounds per second. 4 boobers were shredded instantly, and a 5th was knocked offline by a localized jammer. Only 1 limped through, causing minor damage to a single launcher before being silenced. The math for Belgorod was a cold shower. 16 drones lost for 1 scratched truck. Kiev's invincibility was gone, and Moscow's commanders were finally breathing trio. Their relief was premature. While Belgorod celebrated cracking the code, a massive swarm of 75 drones was already screaming toward Rostov for total unmitigated saturation. If Belgorod was a reality check, Rostov was about to be a total system failure. You see, the Russian commanders in Rostov thought they were prepared. They'd seen the reports from the north and cranked their S-300 and Pantsir radars to maximum sensitivity. They were ready for a fight. What they weren't ready for was a digital and physical tidal wave. Ukraine didn't send a strike force to Rostov. They sent a saturation swarm. We're talking about 75 drones, screaming toward the most critical logistics hub for the entire Donbas front. 45 of these were the Corvo cardboard decoys. But this time they weren't just flying. They were maneuvering in a coordinated, chaotic dance designed to do one thing: crash the Russian brain. Here's the terrifying math for the Russian operators. A standard Pantsir S-1 radar can track about 24 targets, but it can only engage 4 at a time. Ukraine didn't just exceed that limit. They obliterated it 3 a.m. Rostov. Russian radar screens aren't showing targets. They're showing a digital blizzard. This is a military DDoS attack. 75 drones crashing the planet's most sophisticated air defense network, while S-300 batteries waste $2 million missiles on $500 cardboard decoys. 30 real boomer drones are weaving through the logistics park like robotic wolves. The target hangar 7 housing 9 Iskander-M launchers. As Russian crews scramble, 5 bombers slam into a nearby fuel depot. The resulting shockwave literally rips the hangar doors off their hinges. Then comes the precision kill. 25 bombers dive into the exposed hangar, triggering a 40-minute chain reaction of secondary explosions. The math for Rostov 4 Iskanders vaporized. 6 transloaders shredded. Ukraine didn't just strike. They amputated the logistics artery feeding the Donbas front. 4:02 a.m. Krasnodar. By now, the Russian command is in a state of absolute hair-pulling hysteria. They've watched their missile hubs from the northern border down to Rostov go up in flames, and they know Krasnodar is the next neck on the chopping block. To stop the fireflies, they decided to unleash the beast, the Krasuka 4. This is Russia's most powerful electronic warfare monster. As the Ukrainian swarm approached, the Russian operators slammed the panic button, cranking the Krasuka to 110% power. They thought they just built an impenetrable electronic fortress, but they had actually just handed Ukraine the keys to the front door. You see, in the world of high-stakes there's a phenomenon called self-blinding. When you pump out that much RF energy, it's like trying to find a candle in a room filled with strobe lights and mirrors. The Russian S-400 and Torm, 2 radars in Krasnodar, were suddenly suffocated by their own jamming wave. They couldn't see the drones because they were too busy listening to their own screaming. Electronic noise. It was the military equivalent of a flashbang going off in a small closet. Everyone is blind, including the person who threw it. While the Russian operators were frantically trying to filter through their own white noise. Ukraine's real assassins were already inside the perimeter. 30 Ludi stealth drones were gliding through the electronic fog. These aren't your typical metal-framed quadcopters. The Ludi is built almost entirely of carbon fiber and composite materials, meaning it has a radar cross-section smaller than a handful of marbles. Even better, these drones were programmed to exploit the jamming. They used passive homing. They didn't fight the Krasnodar signal. They used it as a lighthouse to guide themselves directly to the center of the Russian base. The target in Krasnodar was a high-value staging area, where 8 Iskander-M launchers were being prepped to rain hell on southern Ukraine. The scene was a masterclass in sitting duck logistics. Because of the EW blackout, the Russian crews couldn't even communicate with their own headquarters. They were sitting in the dark, literally and figuratively. When the 30 Ludis hit, they didn't just explode. They executed a coordinated surgical strike using AI-assisted terrain matching that doesn't need a single GPS satellite. The drones locked onto the massive cooling fins of the 44-ton launchers. The physics of the impact was absolute poetry and destruction. The Lutis-shaped charge warhead punches a hole through the engine block, followed by a secondary incendiary blast that ignites the hydraulic reservoirs in seconds. 3 Iskander-M launchers were transformed into pillars of white-hot magnesium and aluminum fire. 5 massive transloaders were shredded as the nearby missile caches cooked off, sending supersonic shrapnel through everything in a 200-yard radius. As the smoke rose over Krasnodar, only one target remained: Crimea. And for the grand finale, Ukraine wasn't just sending drones. They were bringing the big guns, a legendary Western fighter and a gutsy plan for 2 years. The Kremlin has bragged that Crimea is an unsinkable aircraft carrier, protected by a forest of S-400s and Tor-M2 batteries so thick, even a mosquito couldn't get through. Ironically, that's exactly what Ukraine wanted them to think. While the Russian command was busy staring at the smoke rising from Krasnodar, a single high-tech ghost was screaming toward the peninsula. At 500 miles per hour enter the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Instead of flying straight into the kill zone, the pilot stayed low, masking the jet's signature against the jagged Crimean cliffs. He wasn't there to dogfight. He was there to open the door with a flick of a switch. The F-16 unleashed its ALQ-131 jamming pods, flooding every Russian radar frequency with a digital scream. Simultaneously, he let loose a pair of AGM-88 HARM missiles. These things are radar-eating sharks. They don't need a target location. They just sniff out the electronic smell of a Russian radar and dive down its throat at Mach 2. The Russian Tor-M2 crews panicked. They had 2 choices: stay online and get eaten by a HARM missile, or shut down and go blind. They chose survival and hit the off switch. That was the moment the trap snapped shut. With the big eyes of the Russian defense temporarily blinded, Ukraine flooded the zone with 10 Corvo decoys and 10 Bober drones. It was a sacrificial gambit. The Russian operators, desperate to protect the 6 Iskander-M launchers that were currently being prepped to level Odessa, started firing their short-range cannons like madmen. Tracers filled the sky like angry fireflies, shredding the decoys while the Bober drones danced through the gaps, forcing the Russians to focus every ounce of attention on the swarming wasps right in front of their faces. They were so busy swatting at the drones, they never saw the real killers coming from the sea. 6 Neptune long-range cruise missiles. These homegrown Ukrainian monsters were skimming just 10 feet above the Black Sea waves, hiding in the radar clutter of the ocean spray. By the time the Russian Tor-M2 operators realized, the drones were just a distraction. The Neptunes were already making their final pop-up maneuver. The target was Hangar 12, the heart of the Crimean missile force. The first 2 Neptunes punched through the front doors. At 600 miles per hour, the next 4 hit the roof. The physics of what happened next would make a demolition expert weep. Inside that Hangar 6, Iskander-M launchers were sitting in a row, fully loaded with 60-pound warheads, when 330 pounds of Neptune high explosives met 6,000 pounds of Russian rocket fuel. The result was a geological event. A white-hot fireball nearly a quarter-mile wide erupted into the Crimean sky. The secondary cook-off was so violent, it physically shattered the reinforced concrete of the nearby bunkers. 2 Iskander-M launchers were vaporized instantly. 5 massive transloaders, the backbone of the brigade, were turned into twisted blackened skeletons. This was the biggest fireworks display of the entire 30-minute campaign. The math for Crimea was the final checkmate. 1 F-16 flight and 6 missiles just erased the primary threat to the Black Sea ports. Ukraine didn't just hit Russia. They dismantled their invincibility in front of the whole world. Moscow brought a brute force sledgehammer to a high-speed digital chess match, and in exactly 30 minutes, Ukraine took every one of their pieces. The leverage strike was over. The silence that followed in the Russian bunkers was deafening. Putin wanted a dark winter for Ukraine. Instead, he got a very, very bright morning on his own soil. 60% of his primary strike force gone, billions of dollars in hardware, scrap metal, and all it took was some cardboard, some beavers, and a whole lot of Ukrainian grit.